Hello there. Very good evening and welcome to Let's Talk Politics. I'm your host, Edward Layne. Um, as usual, this program is dedicated to do a couple of things. One, to talk about the programs, policies, and initiatives of our government and how we've been doing since we assumed office on August 2nd of last year. It also deals with responding to the misinformation and lies coming from the opposition because they have seemed to be on a campaign really to just spread lies, spread misinformation, to play the racist card. And that seems to be all that they can offer. Joining me on this Saturday evening, I have Sanjeev Datadin, who is my resident guest for Saturday evenings. Of course, we're joined this evening by Gillian Burton. Gillian is an advisor to the Minister of Labour. Gillian, and of course, I should say, trade unionist for a very, very long time. Gillian, Sanjeev, good evening and welcome to the program.
Ed, thank you and good evening to your viewers and your listeners. And thank you, as usual, for having me on your show. And it's always my pleasure to be here.
You may be muted there, Gillian. I think that might be the problem. Check if you're muted. I think we're getting some issues there. But while Gillian is resolving that, maybe we start the program. Gillian is going to come in and join us. But I want to start with one of the most topical issues, an issue of concern for very many Guyanese across our country, and that is the situation in many regions, many communities across the country where there is flooding that are taking place as a result of a natural phenomenon of heavy rainfall, heavy persistent rainfall, coupled with high tides in many instances. I want to speak to that issue, and I continue to do this because I think it is important we continue to inform our nation, to let people understand the situation on the ground and how we are responding. And I keep making the point repeatedly that the flooding that is taking place is not as a result of negligence of the government. It's really an issue of really the natural phenomenon. But what is important, like I repeatedly say, is how we respond as a government. We have been on the ground. The ministers of this government have been on the ground all across the country, all the communities that are affected. Well, if not all, majority of them, and that exercise is continuing. Um, Earlier today, no less a person than His Excellency journeyed into the Region 7 area where he visited communities that are affected. The president is practically on an outreach to all the areas that are affected by flooding. And this is not just going to communities and visit and say, hey, we understand you're flooded and we're sorry. You know, going to these communities and to really and truly provide tangible support to people, whether in the form of providing them with hampers, whether of dealing with the challenges that they have otherwise with their livestock, their farms, etc. The point is, the government number one priority is one to get the water off the land, and the other priorities are to safeguard livelihoods and lives. Sanjeev, we've seen the kind of work that this government has been doing ever since the floods, the very first instance of the floods. The response has been quite tremendous.
Ed, you're very right to emphasize, and I will do it as well. This is a natural phenomenon. They are rain clouds that are coming off the Atlantic. If you look at any website, any of the weather forecasts, you will see that Guyana and Suriname and Venezuela, and for the last few days, Trinidad as well, has been inundated with rain. It is a lot of rain in a very short space of time. The result for that is that there is water on the land itself. It doesn't have the time to quite drain off as quickly as it would. As a result, there is flooding, but there is also so much rain falling that the banks of the Kanji Creek, the banks of the various canals are overtopping. And when they are overtopping, it means that the Demerara River, other rivers are swelling, and that in itself creates the difficulty. Now, Ed, that there's nothing anybody could do about that. Rainfall is rainfall, it's a natural phenomena, but you see the Irfan Ali led administration, what they are doing to respond, because we do have the power to respond to it. We have to look after lives, livelihood, accommodation for persons who are in areas that their homes are flooded and the neighboring communities in which they live are flooded. So we have to provide shelter in some areas. You see the CDC, which comes under Prime Minister Mark Phillips, has been responding very quickly with making sure that truckloads of supplies of various kind. You've seen Minister Frank Anthony saying that medical teams are being dispatched just to make sure that they are in the event that waterborne diseases, which are take advantage in this sort of a situation because of the flooding, because of the excess of the water on the land, that they are there with treatment and their doctors to attend to people. We saw His Excellency, the President was in Region 3 yesterday with Minister Manik Chan. He was in, I think today, if you look at his Facebook page, I think it's Region 7. You see him with his long boots on, his sleeves rolled up, and he's at work. So are all the members of cabinet, because they're going to be there to show, not only to show the people that they care, but to take supplies, to deal with issues as they arise on the ground. So we don't have to wait on this long chain by which you will get a report what is going on, someone will assess it, then it goes, so then they decide what to do. The decisions are being made immediately. The responses, as we have seen, have been immediate. The ferrying of supplies, the trucking of supplies to various areas, the providing of boats so that supplies can get there, the movement of people from in Kwakwani, it has been particularly difficult. I am seeing on social media that it appears that the water is starting to recede a bit in Kwakwani, but of course there is more rain projected and forecast, and we don't know exactly where that will go. It might be a situation where there's only a gentle reprieve or a temporary reprieve. But be that as it may, what the government and all of cabinet are doing is getting out to the communities, to delivering to those communities all the assistance that is possible, medical supplies, food supplies, cleaning supplies, because that, of course, has to be done. And of course, all of this is being done in the middle of a pandemic. So even while all of this is going on, we still need to be careful. We still need to observe the rules as it relates to the pandemic. And we still need to do the very best to socially distance ourselves and to make sure that we wash our hands. But the response is not temporary. It's not that you are seeing assistance and supplies today and then you don't see tomorrow or the next day. Once there is a need, the supplies of goods and the supply of medical services, it is continuing. So as required, arrangements are being made to ensure that the supply chains to the communities that are hard hit are continuing. You're seeing across the coast in the news and on social media that they have been deployed excavators and other heavy equipment to try to build temporary dams in some cases, to clear areas, to assist that there is movement of water, and everything is being done. No effort is being spared to alleviate the effects of this heavy rainfall, and no effort is being spared to make sure that the people lives, livelihood, and even to the best abilities, even livestock and crop are protected as much as they can. This is not going to be it is not a simple process. It is very difficult, but it is being done, and it is being done in a way that so far, for example, I've seen no report that we've had any unfortunate incident of a person dying or anything as a result of it. Fingers crossed we keep it that way. We still have to be careful. We still have to be vigilant. We still have to take care of ourselves and take care of those in our community.
Thanks so much, Sanjeev. I figure Gillian is back with us now. Um, Gillian, we're talking about the whole situation of the flooding and how we have responded as a government. And interestingly, I saw attempts by Harman and many in the PNC, in the opposition, to water down our response and the manner in which this government has been operating. A very transparent, a very inclusive manner. And I think what has been getting to them is the fact that people like Minister Zulfikar Mustafa and others are going into communities that they somehow, the PNC somehow thinks that they have a transport over these communities and the people who live in these communities. And the fact that we're going into those communities and treat and ensure that these very people who supported them, as they may see it, that those people are benefiting from the resources of this country if they are flooded, but we're going there and we're putting resources into those communities to ensure that we alleviate their issues. The fact of the matter is the PPP has a history of, as a government, has always been a government that governs in the interest of all Guyanese, regardless of who you voted for. But I think that is getting to the Harmons and the others. I saw Harmon, the man who sat on private jets and private yachts and in air conditioned rooms for 5 years and totally ignore the suffering and the needs of the people of this country, is now running to some of the communities as though he care about them because of the flooding. What is he taking to them? Absolutely nothing. He's going with his gang and they're taking photos of Harman in a community, knocking on a few doors, and they come back and they make politics out of it to say that we were there and the people are suffering. Yes, if you're claiming that the people are suffering, what are you taking to them? Have you taken anything to them? Harman promised some people, I think, hampers by Thursday morning. Might be interesting. You know what I didn't see? I didn't see the photos of him giving the hamper to them, but I saw the big story of him going and promising them. We would love to see the photos because, as far as I'm concerned, Harman did absolutely nothing apart from playing politics and try to gain political mileage out of the suffering of people. Gillian.
Well, Eddie, that is the nature of the APNU. Promises, 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 and nothing materializes out of the promises. But I want to say that our government's response to the flood is overwhelming, and it shows that we have a government that is proactive. They're not sitting down in, fancy offices and passing instructions or making promises. What they are doing, they're underground. And that happened from day one. They're with the people. The manifesto did say that the government will be a government for all people. President Irfan Ali, on taking up his promised the Guyanese people to be a president and for the government to be a government for all Guyanese. And they are doing what they said. And so that is why we will see from day one, not only to the response to this flood, but you mentioned something that the opposition is going out to areas and trying to, take photos and make promises. But when the PPP was in opposition, we didn't go and take photos and make promises. We were actually there helping the people. We put our shoulders to the wheel, we put our heads together, we got assistance, and we went out there. Today, The former government is yet to show the Guyanese people what they did during this pandemic. We were in a position when we were giving out hammers, when we were giving out masks, when we had people mobilized to sew masks before any, the disposable masks came into the country. We were out there with the people, and that is the nature of the PPP civic government at all times. We're for the people, we're grassroots, and we're people. So it's nothing strange that we're doing, and it is something that we will to do. And we have to look at the interest from a trade union's perspective. We have persons who are affected, who are in the formal and the informal sectors of this country. We have our farmers, we have our small businesses, we have those who work in the homes, those who work in offices with other persons. They are all affected. And so we have to get out there and be with them. We have to see their needs. Because if we're talking about development and we're talking about taking this country forward, talking about unity, and we're talking about working together. What we are seeing here is the fact that we are indeed interested with moving Guyana forward, with taking Guyana to the other level, and we are really and truly united together. We're uniting the people, despite the Harmons and all those who want to divide us. We are there. We are working for the people. We are with the people, and the people recognize this.
Thanks, Gillian. And so I don't want us to belabor the point and to continue to repeat what we've said in the past with regards to the response. I think the Guyanese people are able to judge for themselves, and they see that the government is there, standing willing and ready to support them to ensure that here the reality is we are all in this together. The floods, it's a natural phenomenon. It could affect any community because it's a rain coupled with high tides. And as Guyanese, we're all in this together. This is not about who do better than whom, but the sad reality is ever so often is that we have to come here to try to explain and to debunk the misinformation and the lies of many in the opposition because they are using every opportunity. And I keep seeing statements from people like Sherrod Duncan. This guy totally upsets my stomach when I his name and what he does on social media, where he used the suffering of every single person, regardless of their situation. Regardless of their situation, he make politics and he make light of everybody's suffering. This is the kind of small-minded, low IQ, I don't know what else, slimy individual people like Sherrod Duncan and the others are. I mean, how could you do that with the issues of people? So the reality is we don't want to waste a lot of time going after constantly and repeatedly talking about what we do and what we're doing. I mean, we have an obligation, we're the government, that's our responsibility, but often we have to let the people know that things are happening and that what the opposition is doing is merely playing politics. These are guys who sat in their offices, like I said earlier, for 5 years, who weren't concerned about the needs of many, many people. And I see them criticizing canals that are blocked, overgrown bushes, and saying this is the state of affairs. Those bushes didn't grow in the last couple of months. Those canals weren't blocked in the last couple of months. What did we do when we assumed office? We went to the communities and ensured they plant bushes and grass and all sorts of things, and we dumped mud in the canals and blocked them up. It is as a result of the neglect for 5 years from that cabal that were concerned about enriching their friends and their families and their cronies, that weren't concerned about the average poor man in this country. And as we speak here, His Excellency came back from the interior this afternoon. Region 7, where he toured the communities. I'm told that he has departed or about to depart to head to Region 2, where he's going to visit communities over the next 24 hours to meet with people to see the concerns that they have and try to address them. And what he's doing, like I said, is to make decisions on the ground. So I want to say to the people, forget the naysayers, forget the opposition. They are obstructionists. They are concerned about making politics regardless of what your situation is. The fact of the matter is, as a government, we are reaching out to people and we are willing and ready and prepared to address their needs in these difficult times. Again, we are saying that we're in this together. Gillian, Sanjeev, this brings me now to some other issues. And sad that we have to address these issues. We should have been using this time to really talk about our programs, our policies, our initiatives that are transforming the lives of people, like our drive to get 50,000 house lots in 5 years, to create 50,000 jobs, the 20,000 scholarships, the upgrades of roads, community roads and bridges, bringing potable water to people, creating job opportunities to people. Those are the things that we are supposed to be talking about. Unfortunately, you have a group of hustlers who spent 5 years and did nothing for people, are putting us in a situation where we feel obligated to let the nation know what is happening. So these hustlers utilized 5 years, and what did they do? They increased the employment for, across agencies. They created opportunities to people, their specific people rather. The jobs for the friends and family and somebody's niece or somebody's nephew, somebody's uncle. They create and they force people into government agencies, balloon the employment cost and the number of people in agencies, that people are in agencies and they are doing nothing. There's a lot of redundancy, a lot of people's, 5 persons doing jobs, a job that one person can do. And that is not even enough for one person, but you have 5 persons employed to do the same thing. Like how you had people who were advisor on petroleum and knew nothing about but petroleum apart, know nothing about oil rather, apart from cooking oil that she was using in her kitchen. And you had people, one man was director of parks who lives overseas. So that is the kind of situation they created. And I want us to spend some time to talk about the Ghana Water Incorporated, where they've increased the number of employees from 600 to 1,300. They added 700 new employees there. And guess what? Fair enough, you employ more people. One would expect that your service would have improved. People would have gotten better services as a result of your increased employment, having more people to do the job. You should be more effective and more efficient. Unfortunately and sadly, it was the opposite. It was the complete opposite under the APNU AFC. So you hire 700 people, you cannot justify their employment, you increase the employment cost more than twofold, your company was running bankrupt, and you were busy throwing 50 million parties. You're throwing Christmas party for $50 million and all sorts of things. Your travel all over the place, 50 million and $60 million and all sorts of things. And when we attempt to right a wrong, to fix a situation, to say that, look, we know this agency don't need this number of people, and we are going to make necessary adjustments, then what you hear all sorts of cries. You hear cries about racism, you hear cries about you're putting people out of jobs. Listen, this government has an interest in creating job opportunities. But we are not just going to create opportunities or create employment for employment's sake. You have to create employment so that whoever is employed in a position is making a meaningful contribution to a process. Gillian, you being a veteran trade unionist, I want to bring you in here. I know you're familiar with this situation, and we see the nonsense that's coming out from Van West Charles, the guy who threw the 50 million party for Christmas with his gang. We see the rubbish that's coming out of him.
Eddie, it's very interesting when you listen to the narrative coming from these persons. Because one, as you said, you don't create employment for employment's sake. Two, the PPP civic administration has always been known to have the interests of workers at heart, to ensure that their employment and to ensure that persons have a livelihood. That given, I do not attest to the fact that the government, the PPP civic government now, would throw people to the wolves. We saw that happen in 2015 when APNU took over, when the COSOs were thrown out of jobs. Over 30,000 jobs were lost during that short period of time. But what we're seeing happening now, it's a case where an organization, because of the finances being abused and misused by the previous management, is now in a financial position where it cannot keep the amount of employees that they have because of the fact that there is not enough money to pay those persons. And what is the narrative that is being spread and given out there is that, this bad PPP government is throwing persons, especially of a particular ethnicity, out into the wolves, throwing them on the road, putting them out of jobs. That is not so. They need to speak, but they don't understand what happens in a labor perspective, so they would say anything. But when an organization, a business can no longer afford to keep its financial obligations, which one of that paying its employees, their salaries, and on time, then they have to make adjustments. Sad to say, it comes with downsizing most of the time. And what we see happening here, it's a case where GWI has to downsize. Persons have to go off. They have to terminate it. And I want to make this clear. They're not being dismissed. They're being terminated. And the difference with that is that the Term and Severance Pay Act says that once the employer can give good reason, good cause why they're terminating that employee, that's it. And most of these employees would have been contract workers. And so an employer has that privilege, that right, not to renew a contract because of whatever reasons there might be. And sad to say, this reason is because they cannot keep the amount of staff and pay them their required salaries that they agreed to and on time. So what are they to do? They have to let persons go. It's sad. We do hope that they will be able to find employment somewhere else. But it's nothing on purpose. The previous management with all those $50 million and the big splurges and the big overseas trips, what did we benefit from it? You have the auditors who are looking at discrepancies that occurred during that management period. So, they must not go out there and spread the lies and rumors that they're doing. Speak the truth. They mismanage the organization just as how they mismanage the country. And that is why when the PPP civic administration came into government, there was no money. And this is the second time around it has happened. It's as the older folks would say, the whining and the dining that takes place with the PNC administration. We saw it happen in the 7th and the 8th. And we see it again in 2015, from 2015 to 2020. This has become part of their DNA to do things like this, bankrupt the country, and then the workers, the people have to suffer. The new government has to take very stringent steps to take on board while they're out there spreading lies, propaganda, rumors. It's sad for any political party who aim from time to time to be the government to put itself in that position and put its citizens of the country in that position.
I think you muted it.
Yeah, thanks, Gillian. Sanjeev, I bring you in here. I want your thoughts on this.
Ed, it's a very simple thing. We live in the real world. Um, GWI must operate in the real world, in this country. They're not. It's not a fantasy. This is not Harry Potter or some other fantasy. This is the real world. Now, at the time, the PPP administration, the Irfan Ali-led administration, took office in August of 2020. 900 million, more than $900 million was owed to suppliers of GWI. GWI had accumulated more than $7 billion in debt to GPL. At the same time, while these debts were being racked up, GWI more than doubled its labor force. It had a labor force of 600 people. It became 1,300 people. Now, your debts are rising. You can't pay your suppliers. You can't pay the power company, but you're hiring more people. In which alternate universe would that make sense? No business can survive that way. Now, in addition to which, at the time, the infrastructure, the reports that you see on social media, the infrastructure, the locations had deteriorated. The equipment of GWI had also deteriorated. Those had to be restored. That is to be restored at a cost. Now, additionally now, in 2019, it is reported they spent $55 million on a party. That's got to be some party. $55 million, a company that is in financial straits. This is a public company. This is the people's money. This is the state. How could they spend that on a party? Then for 2 years running, 2018 and 2019, they spent more than $26 million on travel. Where are they traveling to? Maybe the moon or something. But how could a company foot those bills, incur those expenses, have such losses, and still expand its labor force? Who are going to pay those people? Where is money going to come from for those people to be paid? And then remember, there was the opposition at one time saying, one member of the opposition at least was saying that the treatment of water being supplied and the chemicals in the water to make it potable was being compromised. That was, of course, a plain lie. But what was happening under the last administration is they were cutting corners on the suppliers, and the suppliers were not being paid. Are you surprised the suppliers wouldn't want to supply anymore? So there were difficulties. Now, this is a company that is essential. Water is life is their motto. This is true. The whole nation needs water, potable, clean water. Now, this has to be provided at a cost. Now, in priority of cost, GWI's obligation is to supply safe, clean, potable water to the nation. That's their number one priority. So they have to get that right. The second thing they have to be able to keep functioning is pay their bills. They must be able to pay for the supply that they need. They must be able to pay the electricity bills as they're utilizing. So how can you then double your labor force in that circumstance? So you have to find a way to recoup losses, to get yourself back on track, and to perform and function and deliver the services that the nation requires. So to do that, you've got to give up on the wage bill. The wage bill is usually a recurring expense that happens every month. But you have to be able to deliver services that are equivalent to what you have. And when you're in financial difficulty, any company, and in financial straits, you find ways to provide the services you require by lowering your overheads. Wages is one such overhead. Now, it is inexplicable that from 600 employees, GWI, during all of this period of being unable to meet its obligations and to deliver the services to the Guyanese people, twice the labor force, more than twice, 600, they hired 700 people. That was surely not sustainable. And what is being done now is that is being righted. Now, you can claim all you want about why people are being dismissed, and you can raise all innuendos about race and all other things that are untrue. But if you could explain, and this is for the opposition to do, how you doubled the labor force and how you were so skillful to create such debt, how did you intend to meet those obligations? How could you have done so? There is no other path. Regrettably, there is no other path. GWI has got to reduce its overheads. It was capable of functioning with 600 employees, does not need 1,300 employees. It has to be able to pay suppliers, and it must stop having $55 million parts.
Oh, I thought we lost there, Sanjeev. Um, so, so the reality is, we have to examine these issues for what they're worth, right? And we can't allow emotions and we can't allow lies and misinformation coming from a cabal that I don't think had even the interest of those workers at heart, when they employ them. I don't, and it's not a case where this government is just, GWI as an entity is just dismissing the workers. I saw the chief executive officer making it clear that they're working with private and public sector entities to employ the workers. It's a simple case where there is no job for the people at GWI. There is no job for them. So you have to find other places to put them, whether in the private sector or the public sector. And it's simply that. I know time is quickly slipping away from us, and I wanted us to touch on one other issue quickly, and that has to do with the continuous bullyism by some in the opposition, and this has to do, these guys somehow think that they're still controlling the state apparatus, they're still in charge. And if from opposition they're trying to be this abusive to the state, to try to abuse power, God forbid had they gotten back into office. We saw the abuses, and in this particular case, I'm referring to, as my good friend Joe Hamilton, the Minister of Labour, would put it, the pretentious crook, David Patterson, who, despite this man wants to preside over the Public Accounts Committee, a committee that examined and saw tremendous, deep-rooted fraud and corruption he was involved in his ministry, the ministry he presided over, of beds, bangles, and bed sheets that were purchased for him, all the fancy gifts, the monies from the asphalt plant. And the guy continues to try to bully members of the Public Accounts Committee to say that he's not going to remove himself as chair. The members of the committee made it clear, absolutely clear. And look, the government don't want the chairmanship of the Public Accounts Committee. Principle dictates that if you're the subject, or if you're somehow fingered in anything that the committee or anybody is examining, it is obvious that you got to recuse yourself. You cannot want to chair a committee that examines records and found that somehow you were complicit or culpable, complicit in some offense that was committed. The man continues to bully his way, and now it has reached a stage where I think the right and correct action is being taken by the other members of that committee to ensure that David Patterson is removed. You cannot put cat to watch milk. That is precisely what David Patterson wants. Sanjeev, I'll bring you in here first before I bring in Gillian.
Ed, that's a good one. Cat to watch milk. But I am a member of the PAC, the Public Accounts Committee. Since the 1st of February, I can tell you that the work of the Public Accounts Committee has been disrupted. It has been disrupted because we are in the process of looking at the accounts, the public expenditures that occurred in 2016. And we're still there. There were things that were discovered as have been published about the payment for scales, millions of dollars for scales. I think the scales cost nearly 500,000 US dollars. So tens of millions of dollars for scales, which have never been received by the Ministry of Public Works. There was also, and it's public knowledge that has been published, that charges have resulted in matters to do with the asphalt plant. During that time, what raised in the Public Accounts Committee is that the person who is presently the chairman, Mr. Patterson, that he should step and allow one of his colleagues opposition on one of the members of the Public Accounts Committee from the opposition side to take his place as chairman. And that he should not do that because public confidence demands that the person who is at the helm of the Public Accounts Committee is taught or is respected enough or is thought of by the population at large to not have any such difficulties. Now, there are charges that are in the court that are ongoing, and there could be no public confidence in a situation like that, certainly not within the membership of the PAC. Now, since the 1st of February, that motion was brought. Essentially, if we just do a little bit of background so people understand, the Public Accounts Committee scrutinizes public spending and the Auditor General's report, essentially what happens and what happens to what was allocated in the budgets. Now, that is to do with who are the persons who were ministers, etc., and the permanent secretaries. They're answerable to that committee. Now, what happens and what the rules provide for is that there's presently 5 and 4. 5 members are appointed to the committee from the government side of Parliament, and 4 are appointed from the opposition side. But the rules provide that the opposition, the chairman must be a member of the opposition. So there is no difficulty that Mr. Patterson, who is one of those 4 members, while he is the chairman, he can step aside quite easily and allow one of his colleagues on the committee to be appointed the chairman, and we can move on. He doesn't have to leave the committee. That's not what we're saying. We're saying you can't be the chairman. You can't be the person that everyone is that would head the PAC. So since the 1st of February, Ed, this has been going on. Then what has followed? What has followed has been a circus. It's one excuse after another. Mr. Patterson is not putting the question to a vote. He keeps recusing himself, but he remains in the room. And he keeps raising rather fanciful arguments and suggestions as to why he's not doing it. Now, what also transpires, or what I can say transpired because it has been published in the media, is that they became a whole big issue as to what will happen. And there was assistance or from the clerk of the National Assembly provided advice as to what he believed should happen, and he conferred and offered that advice. That was not followed. The clerk then obtained independent legal advice from an attorney who is neither government nor opposition, and he received that advice. That advice was also very clear that if they were refusing to do so, then we can have a temporary chairman to deal with the motion and move forward. That's not being permitted because the motion is not being put. But interestingly enough, as has been reported in the media, Mr. Patterson has solicited advice for the PAC from Mr. Ramjatan. Now, the PAC didn't ask for Mr. Ramjatan's advice, and Mr. Patterson is free to obtain legal advice from whomever he chooses, but not for the purposes of the PAC. That's his own personal advice. That's nobody else's business. But of course, he wants to rely on that advice, which I can say without going into the details of what it is that I, as an attorney, do not agree with. Absolutely do not agree with it. But be that as it may, the position is the PAC since the 1st of February, it's now the beginning of June, has not been able to do any work. And we're not able to proceed. Now, with that being the position, there is a motion that has been tabled to the Parliament that what should happen is we should have a new chairman, essentially, of the PAC. It has outlined very clearly, I think I saw it in the press this morning or yesterday morning, what has been outlined is very clear as to what has been going on. And you can't allow one person to frustrate a parliamentary committee this way. And you can't allow public scrutiny of what took place in 2016 and the expenditures in 2016 to go unaccounted for. There is no account for those scales. That has been reported in the press. There are all the issues with the asphalt plant. And we're only at 2016, Ed, only at 2016. And these things are being discovered. Now, while that is going on, we can't stop. We have to do 2017, 2018, 2019. We have to do up to the present. So the scrutiny of government spending must take place. It must continue, and it can't be held ransom. I insist, it cannot be held ransom by the wishes and proclivities of one man. This is a national issue. The people deserve more. One man can't thwart the will of an entire nation and prevent scrutiny of public spending from 2016. That should never, ever take place. You muted it.
Again, yes. Thanks so much, Sanjeev. Because we're almost out of time, before I give Gillian the honor to wrap the program up with her closing comments, I just wanted to say, when you look at Patterson's behavior, it's like when the little boys playing cricket in the street, and there is this bully in the group who, when he gets out, he kicks down the wicket, throw away the bat and the ball, and break up the game. That is the mentality of Patterson. And it's a PNC mentality, it's an opposition mentality. It's either we in charge or nothing is going to happen. Patterson and his gang, they need to wake up and smell the coffee. There's a new government in place. They don't have the luxury that they had 5 years ago when they were misusing state resources and when they were bullying the people of this country and bullying everybody. They've lost the no confidence motion. They bullied their way and refused to call elections within 3 months. They lost an election and they ran to the court and tried to bully the court. Not people like Basil Williams threatening judges and all sorts of things, wielding power. Those days are over. Those days are over. Patterson, the reality is Patterson has to account for the bangles, the bed, and the bed sheets. And he cannot sit at the helm of a committee that is trying to question him about the source and what he did and how exactly was the process used to buy him bed sheets, and bangles. And his colleague Ferguson getting gift and all sorts of things. And him cannot really justify what happened with the asphalt plant money and the $9,000 that went mysteriously into his bank account instead of going back to Marin. He cannot sit at the helm there. He has to realize that. He has to realize that maybe he's on course to be charged criminally and probably be in jail for stealing taxpayers' money while having people in this country suffer for 5 years. Gillian, I give you a chance to wrap things up.
Thanks, Eddie. You know, it's sad when we have to see public officials not wanting to adhere to the very laws and the rules and the policies and the regulations that they try to impose on other persons. It's so sad. And as I was listening to Sanjeev and his explanation of what is happening there on the PAC, it's just a simple case. Why can't you just step aside and let the process continue? You know, you would have been at the head of in a political party, taking a leadership role, men, and you know what's right from what is wrong. And I help but wonder, had it been in the reverse, had it been the PPP, what would have taken place? We would have seen a lot of protests and all kind of things going on the road. You know, they would have gotten their supporters to go out and come out and protest. But they need their supporters to protest against the thing just in the wrongdoing that they're doing right now. A right is a right and a wrong is a wrong. But we're not seeing that happening, you know. And persons, as you said, Eddie, feel that they're still in government. They still feel that they're the boss. They still feel they're in control. And so they still continue to bully, try to bully the way, bully the system, bully persons. It's part of the name. And what we're seeing is what is reflected even in GCOM, you know, with Lowenfield and Myers and the rest, you know, and the motion that has been brought against them. And we hear the rhetoric of it's racism, and this is what is happening to persons of a particular race and ethnicity. But at the end of the day, looking even at that situation, what has happened? The world witnessed the injustice, the fraud, and election fraud is a very serious indictment on a country's democracy. Yet we have persons like Vincent Alexander who is wanting to screw this thing about racism. He needs to stop, pause, checkmate, and rethink. Because if you're saying that you're willing to call actions of those persons, which you did, then you're saying that you have no right yourself to be there as a commissioner on such an important commission that is there to ensure that the rule of law, democracy, and good governance prevails in a country by way of the elections that are held, whether it's local government, it's regional, or it's general elections. So what we're seeing is a totality of a regime that tells itself it has the right to govern this country. But the Guyanese people would have spoken in 2020. We don't want that. We learn about democracy, we know about democracy, we believe in the, and we will fight to ensure that democracy continues in this country. We will not allow the Harmons and the Pattersons and the Vincent Alexander to take this country into their hands and bully the people of this country. We're not going to stand for bullyism. And with a government like civic administration, we will work together to ensure that all Guyanese have a piece of the pie. Because when you go to the polls to elect a government, you don't elect a government to make your lives uncomfortable and miserable. You elect a government that will take you and your family lives to the other level, that will take the country forward. The Guyanese people would have spoken in 2020, and we will continue to maintain democracy has to prevail at all levels.
Gillian, thank you so much for your closing comments. I just want to drop in before I wrap, though, the fact that I see the sanctimonious gangster has re-emerged again with his weekly program. And imagine David Granger has the audacity to talk about the management of flood and how the place is flooded and drainage. This is a guy who did absolutely nothing for this country apart from his gang hustling all over the place. He had a government of hustlers, and now he's coming to talk to us. But I will leave that for another discussion, Sanjeev and Gillian. I want to thank you guys for being part of the program, and to our viewers, we want to say thanks for being part of the program. Have a good rest of the evening. Thanks for watching.